Today's episode of the What's That Like podcast is brought to you by Opera House Brewing Company, Hillsboro, Illinois. Hashtag drink local. What's that like? What's going on, people? Hey, it's another edition of the What's That Like podcast, and I'm your host, John Knowles. Episode 6 of this third season. Great to be back with you. We've had a lot of episodes lately. We're coming back real quick on this one, trying to get you an episode out before the Thanksgiving week that you can listen to as you're traveling or doing whatever you'd like. We'll probably put out this one, 2 more in December. That'll be it for calendar year 2019. That'll be the last podcast episodes of the decade. And then we'll come back in 2020 with another half dozen or so. This episode, once again, you heard it at the top of the show, brought to you by Opera House Brewing Company, Hillsboro, Illinois. My favorite place was just over there again last week. Good news is they got one of my favorite beers back on tap. Copper Rabbit is back. Copper Rabbit's kind of I never thought I'd like a coffee-flavored beer, but they did this thing with Black Rabbit Coffee right there in Hillsboro, a collaboration. And man, I really like it. It's really good. So go try that out. They've got a new beer they're producing now in a partnership with it's Hardcore Hammers, and they're calling it Hardcore Hammer and Ale. We'll see how that goes. But Opera House Brewing Company, Hillsboro, Illinois. Get over there, right there. Tell Tony and Jennifer the old What's That Like podcast sent you. I don't know if you get a discount, but at least they'll know that their sponsorship dollars are going to work. So want to thank all of you folks that have been following us on Twitter. Let's see, recently we picked up Tobin, and Chris Shear, Don Dow. We've got John Blank. We want to thank all those folks for following us on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at What's That Like Podcast. You can find me on there. And I usually post like current event stuff, share some things, the stuff that's happening, maybe some odd things, a strange video too. You won't get beat up with posts from me on there. I don't post all the time. But what I do, I try to keep it topical and funny. Sometimes we do some history polls, things like that for about odd Illinois history. That's cool. Reviews. We've got a lot of reviews on Apple. Don't forget, if you're listening to the show, go on your phone, scroll down, hit rate and review. Give us a rating and review. Want to thank out some of the folks that done that. RP19, Plasm Bomb, Slew Bill, Jiu-Jitsu 7. Thank those folks for a rating. I really appreciate it. Helps us out. The topic of the day, we've got author Scott Litch. Now, Scott Litch wrote something that I know about half my audience needs, and that's a husband's survival guide to marriage. It's a little humorous look at marriage and making sure you keep everyone happy in the family. You can find that book on Amazon and Outskirt Press, and it's pretty funny. I went through it. It's not a long read. It's about 120 pages, and you'll find it on Amazon or Kindle. We'll give you the links at the end and everything that you need to see it. But it's he's not really from Central Illinois per se, like Opsar, I guess, but he is from Illinois, and I think you're going to get a good kick out of the things he has to talk about in here. It's a lot of fun. Some things we'll talk about. Even though he's from Cub Country, we talk about our little rivalry a little bit there, and just some cool little topics to talk about in this. We'll help you figure out where the best place to go on a Saturday night for dinner is. We'll help you figure out how to survive when you're not home and your wife is, and you know you're not holding up your end of the marital bargain. You know, some things like that. We'll touch all those topics. So without further ado, Scott Litch, you've been married for 28 years, and how do we survive this? What's that like? Scott Litch, how you doing? Welcome to the What's That Like podcast. What's going on today?
Thank you. I'm doing great. What's going on today? Well, I'm glad the snow is melting on the ground. It was feeling a little depressing to have winter already.
Oh, I know. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep track of my 2 dogs and such while my wife's out of town, and just looking forward to chatting with you about marriage, guy's perspective with my book.
Exactly. So you're the author of a book called The Husband's Survival Guide. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to write a book about this.
Well, sure. Well, other than the obvious thing, seeking fame and fortune for myself.
Right.
Just kidding on it. I have been married for 28 years now. Over that period of time, known a lot of couples, some of which have had long marriages, still going strong. Others have been divorced. I haven't kept an exact count, but in some cases, my wife and I have been really surprised that there was one group that she was with, young mothers and their babies, way back when my older daughter was a baby, maybe 11 or 12 moms and babies in that group. We're the only ones that aren't divorced now.
Wow.
So things like that got me to thinking, what is it that might make things work better from the husband's perspective? And then I thought that from my personal experience and that of other guys I talked to, my bias has sort of been that usually, unless the wife is a nut job or some mental problems or issue, let's hope that's not the case, usually it's the husband, in my opinion, who maybe has a misconception or doesn't understand what he needs to do to make things run more smoothly in the marriage. That's sort of where the book came from. And then I thought also I would try to throw in as many humorous anecdotes and aside. It's not really serious. It's more of a common sense and something that hopefully can make you laugh a little bit about marriage.
And it is. It's common sense. It's humor. I read through the book, and certainly it's something that you can pick up some humor from. And I think you said it well. I think it says it in your book. You're not Dr. Phil, but you're just a normal guy that's trying to give common sense stuff to husbands. It's just like, hey, idiots, let's figure this stuff out. You know, there is a difference in communication and what people need and how to get through it, right?
Yeah, mine's more of a Cliff Notes version. You're right. Very, very straightforward. Remember a few basic points, maybe practice a few things. Absolutely. I do plenty of disclaimers. I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, not a social worker. I'm not suggesting that this book, if you need to go to those places, this book is a substitute. But I do think that I probably would have benefited. I think a lot of folks maybe early in their life might have benefited by seeing some of this. I will use one example. I have a niece who's got a boyfriend. She's college age. And he read it. He's a young guy. He's in the mid-20s. And he liked it. Yeah. And he's the type of guy, he is not married yet, but I kind of thought, I wish somebody had told me some of this stuff getting to marriage. Maybe I wouldn't have made the same mistakes. But some of the humor, I think, comes from the fact that I realized after the fact, boy, I really screwed up some things. Maybe by talking about that, other people can avoid those things, because I certainly have not consistently followed all the advice given in the book.
Hey, you gotta learn by living, right? That's how it goes through. I've been married almost 25 years myself, and it takes a while. Right. You got to figure each other out, and certainly once you do, once you get there, things can be good. And you know, the question I'd ask, just for everyone that's listening, the book's probably funny enough that the typical American male like myself, it'll keep my attention span, right?
Yeah, it's a quick read. I don't think you would be taking months and months to get through this at all.
Yeah,
it's those things that come up are common enough among guys that you talk about. Hey, did you do this? Why are you in the doghouse for this? So, besides my own marriage, I did compare notes with some other folks in marriages too. So it's not just the story of my marriage, which may have some unique quirks. But I would say that my wife and I recently were talking about how we seem to be, we feel on a pretty smoother point now in our marriage in terms of just day to day. Our kids are both in college now at the same time, so we're empty nesters. But then I kind of look back and say, well, geez, why did it take so long to get to that smooth sailing? I know there's different cycles in life and things that are more stressful to come up, but I would say that part of it is just trial and error, and I was making a lot of mistakes. And I think in the first 10 years of our marriage, from my recollection, I'm not doing this rose-colored glasses. I think we did argue a lot more, and probably I made a lot of dumb mistakes. Yeah. That if I had a guide like this, I might have been able to avoid.
It's kind of a pocket guide to success is what you're saying.
Pocket guide, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know, so going through your book, let's just kind of talk about some of the topics in there. And you got a chapter on a lot of these things. So avoiding spousal wrath is a topic in here.
Spousal wrath, leading into, well, how do you keep your wife happy? That's your main goal. Yeah. But the wrath is and I used a few examples where it's kind of like the red flag. That if your wife's saying these things, you need to come up with a strategy. And some of the things would be when your wife says, you don't value me as a person, you don't appreciate or hurt my day has been, you don't have any idea how much I'm doing for the family, you're not helping out enough with children, you expect me to do everything around here, here's a bad one. You think your work is more important than mine.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
I never have a free moment. You're sitting there watching football or baseball, and I'm always willing to do things with your friends. But then when I schedule things with my friends, you always have an excuse. And then my last one with she may say, I don't want to hear you talk about how other women are attracted. So again, any of those things I would argue if your wife says that, you've got to come up with some proactive strategies, because that's a pretty good sign she's not happy about something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Or things. I mean, if you can't figure that out, that's pretty obvious. You can't let that go. Those are the types of things I think that they continue that might not be good for the long-term success.
Yeah. I mean, as we're heading into the holidays, God, this is always like putting marriages in a pressure cooker. It can be. It depends on the family. Yes. Some families are different. And I can imagine, I know my listenership, they could be listening to this as they're heading to Thanksgiving holidays or into the Christmas holidays. What are some tips, some tricks you can, give give both the husbands and the wives on how to get through this stressful time?
Yes, you do point out it's going to vary by family, and I realize some families are much more stressed out about Thanksgiving. Others, I have to admit, I've been pretty lucky. My wife's family, pretty laid back for the most part, and I don't get stressed out from that perspective. But there's still other things to get stressed out about: food preparation and timing and events, and whether the dogs are doing something they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
So I think that, like a lot of these things, I think you have to have sort of a conversation and a game plan, expectations of who's going to do what the problems are. There's some give and take. Maybe the husband's not as thrilled with everybody as wife's family, but there's ways you can deal with that. You don't have to talk the same amount to every person at a social gathering. You also can do some bargaining back and forth that, hey, if we go to your parents, your family's Thanksgiving, maybe for the holidays later in the year, New Year's, we do something I'm more keen on doing. So I think you have to recognize that your wife wants to see your family. You have to find a way to make that happen.
Oh yeah,
that's going to be a source of friction if you try to back off of that. And again, other things I think you just have to kind of map out. What are the problem spots with how well was it organized? All those sort of things that can cause stress. If it's completely terrible situation, then maybe you come up with some other plans. I think you have to also decide: are you going to be the host, or is that what your job thing is in the whole family hierarchy? Or are you going someplace else? That's a big thing as well. I think you just got to talk about the expectations and what's stressing you out, and figure out how you want to handle it. And again, from the guy perspective, if you do these things the right way, then I would argue then your wife is not going to be mad at you if you decide you need to sit down and watch a few hundred bowl games and others on TV.
It really is just about compromise, is what you're saying. It's and
exactly.
I would say for most couples, you kind of know the issues, if there are going to be issues, going in. What's going to happen. And as we were talking before, it does vary by family. Some are worse than the others in terms of that goes. I'm pretty lucky myself. Everything works out fairly well for me, but I know that's always the case, at least that it can be a little bit stressful.
My bigger adjustment personally, and this was a huge thing, was being an only child. And whereas my wife has a brother and a sister, who I like fine. It's not nothing that they're bad people, but it's just some of the dynamics they're dealing with. It's just something you have to adjust to. Yeah. My favorite story is just the fact that I remember vividly early in our dating where they were debating for 45 minutes between the three of them. This was probably over Thanksgiving break or something, where to go to dinner. And I was just sitting there like, I don't get this at all. I was the only child. I mean, the decision was in 2 minutes. Where do I want to go to dinner?
And that was it. Yeah. And that's that's one of the big questions I have. If my wife and I probably have any, I don't even call it an argument, but it becomes this thing on Saturdays where it's almost like a showdown at the OK Corral of who's going to pick where we're going to go to dinner, Right. And then it shouldn't be that hard, but it turns out that it is. She'll go, well, where do you want to go? And I'll say, I don't care. And to me, I don't care means I don't care. Right.
Right.
But to her, it might not mean wherever, and I don't care. And it's about getting through that. What's your advice in that situation? That's the big showdown for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, and ideally, you could find out what are some of her favorites and do that, and also particularly in bad weather, hot or cold, drop her off in front of the restaurant while you park the car.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
I think that's important.
Yeah,
but I think you try to know what her favorites are. I know my wife has certain ones. My wife's allergic to onions, so she can't go to places that have a blooming onion or an onion loaf or something. But I know there's a sushi place she likes a lot. So I think I tend to say, well, if it's in her range of something I know she'll like, you kind of figure that out. And also, I do think that technology has made it easier. And I admit, under days, I was more selfish and indignant. Like, how could you possibly schedule something with some other couple when it's game 6 or 7 of the World Series? Like, what do you think? But which is self-centered on my part. But again, with technology and with phones, I mean, you can follow the game when
sure.
Watch it later.
Yeah,
you can DVR it. I think that's become less of an issue as far as the guys how much stay home and watch sports. So I think it's one of those things that's a compromise. You take her out to dinner, place she wants to go, and figure out kind of her likes, and hopefully she will. Now, unless she wants you to take more charge on the thing, in which case, if you know what she likes, then you can figure out the time and all that. But I think that I do think having that date night, whether it's Saturday or Friday, I honestly, we should do more. My marriage, we're trying to do more of that. That's probably one of the biggest things I think is important. Although, to be fair, children intrude tremendously on that in terms of their schedules.
Yeah, well, it becomes about them for a lot of time. Yeah.
I could have had a lot of date nights on Saturday nights, but we were at some kids' tournament for some sport or theater or some musical review or whatever. So, but that being said, I do think you have to work hard to find, besides the right restaurant, to make sure you have that date night.
Yeah, well, let me give you my trick. I don't know if it works, and if my wife is listening to this, she'll
Please,
be in on it, right? It's like,
right.
And somebody told me this. It's like, well,
don't let her listen to this.
So the bottom line is, when you're trying to have this discussion and she asks you where you want to go, you go, it's a secret, but I'll give you 3 guesses. And then, of course, she's going to guess a couple of things. And then because those 3 guesses are supposed to be a secret for her, now you know you pick somewhere she wants to go. How about that? Does that work?
Yeah, I definitely got to make a note of that.
If
I ever do an updated edition, I'll have to add that in.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
See, and I can't take too much credit for it, but at least you can tell people you got it from your old pal Johnny here on the What's That Like podcast.
Awesome. That is great.
Let's talk about some other things. You got some more chapters in the book, and as I kind of scroll through some of the things that are in there, you talk about, as you said before, ultimate goal, and the reason you're reading this book or even want to buy it. Let's be honest, you just want to keep your wife happy wife, happy life. And it's not that hard. It really is. Yeah. But you talk about sometimes you want to play offense and sometimes you want to play defense. So if guys are wired for sports, those are the things that you're always trying to look for. What do you mean by in your book when you're talking about offense and defense on some things?
Well, we'll find the risk of oversimplifying. And what guy doesn't like a sports metaphor?
Yeah. Well, we got to put it in terms that all of us can understand, right?
Right. Well, I guess to summarize it, I mean, offense, I think, is more of not just sitting back but being proactive and thinking ahead about, okay, what are some things I can do? And these are not rocket science. Do I maybe buy her flowers? Do I surprise her with some things? Do I take care of some home projects she's wanted done? Do I do little nice things for her? And that can help with all of that. I think that's just more about being there, not being sitting around waiting for her to tell you what to do.
Right.
Although every husband has that honey-do thing, and sometimes you do have to do a little bargaining saying, honey, I'm happy to write down various things, but you realize I'm going to have to prioritize when we have a discussion. I'm not going to spend the next 12 hours trying to do all of these things that would be impossible. And I think the defense, on the other hand, is more that she's not feeling well. are mad at you for something, or maybe not something you did, but something else going on in her life, or maybe you did screw up, and that's more where I think you guys kind of keep a low profile, maybe take care of some things. Just kind of don't add to the problems by being more of a jerk or making some ridiculous demand.
Yeah, it's like I think you said in your book, it might be a good time to go hang some Christmas lights, rake some leaves. You know,
Project take the dogs on a 2-hour walk. Absolutely, do out of sight, out of mind, and again, it may not always be because of something you screwed up on. It could be something else that's stressful going on with the kids, family, you name it.
Yeah.
Whereas she's just not in the mood. Sometimes she may not want to have conversations. She just is upset, and then in that case, take care of a few things. This is not the best day to have a heart-to-heart, or maybe she's not in the mood for a romantic dinner that particular day.
Yeah. So when did the book come out, Scott? It came out, what?
Just a couple of months ago. Well, yeah I did. I'd say it's been on since about late September on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's on Kindle and paperback. Now that we've got it out, and I have a Facebook page about it, so I'm just starting to do promotions like podcast and trying to do some local book signings and a few other things just to make people aware of it and hopefully read it. And if they like it, particularly if they like it, to write a review. That's always good.
Yeah.
Online. Yeah.
Yeah, it is out there.
If they don't like it, keep it to themselves. You know?
Exactly. We'll get you the links out.
I've given it to a few people to read, and a few informal reviews from friends and my wife. And my wife, I think liked it. But I was finding the one criticism she had, a little bit self-critical here, is she said, "Well, did you have to make so many comments about celebrities you find attractive?" And I said, "Well, point well taken." But I said, my point in saying that was the fact that talk about that with your guy friends. Don't talk about that with your wife.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's sort of a societal fantasy thing. It's like Victoria's Secret. Yeah, there's beautiful women in society, but you're married to your wife. So the fact that you notice other women doesn't mean you shouldn't. You can't help but notice if you're heterosexual and you find women attractive physically, but that's just not very conducive in the marriage to talk about that with your wife and what have you.
Exactly.
If you want to have a beer with guys, talk about it's fine, but it was brought up more in that context, not to it wasn't meant to anger my wife.
Well, I wanted to know. Obviously, at some point you sit down and you're committing this to I'd say pen to paper, but that's not how you did it. You probably typed it out on the computer, right? And at some point your wife's got to go, "Scott, what are you doing?" At what point do you tell her you're writing a book on this stuff?
I think that I told her fairly early, but in hindsight, I probably wish I would have shown her a draft at one point late when I was closer to the end. As I said, she has read it. So to be fair, she had a lot of other things going on, personal, family issues, health-wise. So I didn't want to just be selfish and say, "Hey, drop everything and read that." But it's been percolating, and I've done drafts that gone back a few years.
Okay.
And the original concept, I think I say this in the book somewhere, but originally I was calling it the brown helmet, which is kind of a crude joke. Not the Cleveland Browns, but just that some friend, we'll use that phrase, like when you're getting dumped on by your wife, you'll say, "Oh, you're getting the brown helmet." It's just very vivid illustration there. So it kind of started out with that, but it took a few years to percolate that, put it aside, and then kind of finally got into what I thought was going through it another time, adding some things, doing some editing, and I kind of did that earlier this year. So I kind of had the right inspiration. But to be honest, I got a certain point where I finally got inspired to kind of put the finishing touches on it and push it across the goal line. Another sports metaphor there.
Yeah. Well,
but getting back to the limit. Well, part of that too, and I point out to people I talk to, not just in the book, but part of that whole thing about celebrities and women. There's all sorts of images in society, beautiful women, sex sells, it's on magazines, but it's just the observation of the comment of that for a straight guy, there's a lot of women who are beautiful in the world physically, but the percentage of those that you actually want to be with day in and day out, i.e. your wife, is much, much, much smaller. So hopefully you found the right person with your wife, but the whole point is you married the person for a whole bunch of things beyond just you find her physically attractive.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a basic that unless your goal is to play the field and be a professional womanizer, never get married, then why would you read this book? But that's kind of the reason that I had brought that up.
Yeah,
and,
that's a Charlie Sheen book, not a Scott Litch book.
That's
right?
Charlie Sheen. I'm sure that would be quite an interesting. Yeah, my book has less drug use and sexually transmitted diseases in it. I'm sure.
Well, and that's not a reason not to buy it.
No. There's funny things in there. It's not a lot of sex. It's not a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah, exactly. Scott, one of the things that, comes up is you've got friends. You talked about your wife when she had, I guess, the Mommy and Me group. You're the only ones left, but I'm sure you've got a lot of friends left that are married. You got a couple friends. What do you hand them the book? You hand your guy friend husbands the book, and what do they say about it?
Good question. In fact, I'd say we're kind of in the test phase on that now. I have given it to a few people. A few guys. Those who are Chicago Bears fans, I've encouraged to go ahead and read it now because the season's pretty much shot.
Yeah.
So I'm still getting feedback, and I still have some I'm giving out. I'll probably be getting out some over Thanksgiving, and people will probably try to avoid eye contact with me and turn the other way. But but one friend reviewed it and said he thought it was funny, good common sense. He did use a funny line about it. I'll say, he said it was unapologetically sexist. My wife said, yeah. And I said, well, I don't know if I quite phrase it that way. I think I would say, I don't think I was saying anything. It was in the sense of being disrespectful to women. I think it was more that I would definitely not be in the camp of those who might argue that there's not really that many differences between men and women. Personally, and from observations and reading a few books, I would have to be more in the camp of, yes, we're both human beings, but there are some general differences, which I think are important to be aware of in a marriage between men and women.
Yeah.
So that's all. That may strike some as shocking. I just think it's kind of, that's the way my experiences between couples I've seen in my family. And my wife is not my best guy friend hangout buddy. I mean, she's never going to she's never going to say, hey, let's go watch baseball for 3 hours or go see football. That's not why we're married, because we both like to watch sports on TV.
Well, you brought up a point that my wife and I, it's a friendly debate. There's no real animosity over with this one, but we have fun with this, and you've all seen it on Facebook, and it's somebody's birthday, and I'm so glad I married my best friend. Doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. They both say that all the time. And my wife will look at me and go, well, am I your best friend? And I go, no. You're not my best friend. I go, there's a clear delineation there. I go, friend means not family. You're the best person that's not my family. That is a very good acquaintance of me. A friend, like you said, will help you watch a game, will help you move. Wife, spouse, to me, ranks well above the best friend category. Therefore, I don't have to confuse those two things. Your thoughts on that?
I would tend to agree with you. I'm not sure the right phrase is super friend. Wife is obviously what we call it, but it is more than just your best friend for many reasons.
Yeah.
Not to mention the physical part, but just that you also put expectations and demands and things that are so much more intense than you would with your best friend or even somebody who's a roommate. It's just a much different thing. And again, how many times you sit, because you're planning a whole life together, and you're planning short-term, long-term. You're dealing with a whole bunch of things that it's just not the same with a friendship. But again, I know everybody's different. Maybe some guys have some friends that are so close too. That's like, but in my case, honestly, I've never had a closer person than my wife, partially because I was only child. Mm-hmm. So I never had a brother and sister to bond with. And I do have male friends. I do play baseball with guys. But I mean, it's not the same level of what you're doing with your spouse. I mean, it's just much more briefly superficial. And guys are not going to call me up probably at 11 o'clock and say, Scott, I got to have a deep talk with you about my feelings.
That's true. That's it. There you go. And if they did, you would. But
they may text me and say, God, the Bears Bears offense sucks. But again, it's not going to be a deep thing like I was never loved. I was never hugged as a child. It's not going to be in the text.
One of the things that you have in the book, it's really, it does talk about sex, and you claim that sex isn't all that important. Explain what that means.
I think what it means is what I sort of said earlier, that it's not that sex is not important in your physical attraction fun, but it's just that's not the basis for a marriage and a long-term relationship, because of that whole observation that you can find a lot of women physically attractive, but it's that emotional connection and the day in and day out.
Yeah.
That marriage is a lot of hard work. And it's not just, what I mean is I think you'll enjoy the sex with your wife, but that's just a small part of the day in and day out of marriage. Yeah. And I think that if you think marriage is just going to be one romantic dinner, kind of like a bachelor or bachelorette, one romantic dinner and vacation after another and looking glamorous and all that, that's just not the reality of day-to-day in marriage. So I say that really you have to look beyond that in terms of their compatibility, in terms of you're not really picking your wife just on sort of the beauty contest part of it, if you will. Yeah. So that was more of the issue. Not that sex is not good. If hopefully you're enjoying it with your, but it's just that it's not the basis for a long-term successful marriage. If that's really the only thing driving it.
Yeah, it's important.
At least in my opinion. At least in my opinion, because again, there's just so many more things day in and day out that aren't glamorous and sexy and stuff that you have to do to get through in a marriage.
Yeah, as you said, it's an important component. It's not the only component. It is.
No, you don't want to be right. It's just not the only component, I guess, is a good way to put it. It's certainly not the only component. And I made that comment. It's easy to poke fun at celebrities in our culture, but of course, their divorce rate may not be any higher than that of the rest of the population. I have looked at those statistics, but you're never surprised when you read about some Hollywood couple getting divorced after 3 months or 6 months, something, because you kind of say, well, yeah, it's kind of like getting married based on being on the Bachelorette, or Bachelor, as I was saying. It's like you've seen each other in glamorous settings, dressed to the nines, looking good, attractive people. You had a great time doing fabulous things, like fabulous dinners, and that's the basis for spending your life together. It's kind of like, come on, that's not reality. You're living in the fantasy world, and I think most people get that if they're going to have a long marriage, that it's just not all the glamour. It doesn't mean you don't want to have the romance and all that. It's just can't possibly be that 24/7. It's just not possible. People aren't that, unless they're really jacked up on some happy pills. People are not always in a good mood 24/7.
No.
Particularly if you have stresses like work, kids, dogs, etc., family. It's just no way somebody's going around.
In other words, normal stuff.
Normal stuff, day to day, right?
Yeah.
Like it's right. It's not glamorous when your basement floods, as Ari says twice this year. That's just not fun stuff.
Yeah, it's all about perspective, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't have I don't have 28 years like you. I got almost 25. But you just got to put things in their proper perspective, and be a good guy and support your spouse and what it is they want to do and need to do, and it's about space as well. You mentioned a lot in your book about it's important for you to. It's okay to have your man cave, right?
I do, yeah. As well as your wife. I get to spend every waking moment together. My wife, admittedly, I watch a lot more baseball and football on TV than she ever will. She goes to a lot more live theater in Chicago than I ever will.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's okay, because sometimes you want to do things separately. Not all the time, but I think you just got to find the balance. And I think anybody, I think the one key, well, again, from our perspective, we've always found that even when we did things separately, or spent a day with other friends or did stuff or away for a bit, whatever, work, vacation, that we still wanted to tell each other about it and get their perspective.
Yeah.
So that was more important than whether or not we spent every waking hour together. But we definitely kind of felt like it didn't really happen until we told each other about it and shared that. So that's kind of our way of saying it's okay to spend time apart, but we always have to reconnect and compare notes and this and that. And
what are some of the main takeaways that you would just tell people? Hey, here's, no-brainer stuff, dudes. Think about this. Your life will go a whole lot easier. and your marriage will go a whole lot easier. And as a result, you'll both be a whole lot happier. What are some main takeaways?
It's hard work to keep your wife happy. And therefore, and the wives expect a lot of things. And so I think the big takeaways early on, I talk about the things, a lot of expectations I think women want out of a marriage. It's a lot longer list than men. I'm not going to read all of them, but guy listening to her stories about offering solutions. You've probably heard that one before.
Mm-hmm.
Guys always want to jump in and say, honey, let me tell you how to solve your problem. I'm not asking you for that.
Yeah.
Just telling you how I'm feeling. Do stuff she asked you to do. Do some heavy lifting, carrying groceries, suitcases, killing bugs around the house often. Listening to her stories of her younger days without showing boredom, taking her to see her relatives. I mentioned that earlier. Doing a lot of things, and you want a lot of the positives, but she does want you to be there, and all the little things like don't leave the toilet seat up, help out with the kids, don't just come home and such off. And then for the guys to do things to help with that, I do recommend a few things. These are, I think, pretty common sense. Try to not argue about spending and money. You have to work on expectations there, but I don't think most spouses want to hear, your wives want to hear about your feelings on the credit card bill. And the other common ones, I think I said the one earlier, don't talk about other women. Don't be checking sports scores while you're having a romantic dinner. Key one, probably the two here, which kind of one serious, one not so serious. It seems obvious, don't cheat on your wife.
It's pretty serious. It's pretty obvious, yeah.
Which is pretty obvious, is don't fart or belch in your wife's presence, and don't talk about it. That sounds trivial, but honestly, I think those two things, if you didn't do them, you probably would save yourself a lot of grief.
There you go. Not bad advice. Scott, a thing I like to do here on the What's That Like podcast, kind of a get to know you. It's a little bit of fun. So we'll step out of the survival tips for a second. And it's more about getting to know you as the guest and getting a better idea of the personality of Scott Litch. And so I'm going to ask you some questions here. What song do you sing in the car that you kind of like, not like everyone to know you knew every lyric to?
Well, I have to say I'm a huge Beatles fan, and we have recently got the Beatles Sirius XM, the Sirius radio, so they have a Beatles station.
Right,
so
yeah.
I'm usually singing a Beatles song, and I guess I'm not embarrassed because I probably do know all the words.
Not a bad answer. You can't go wrong with the Beatles. In the music.
I probably know some words from disco songs in the '70s, but I don't tend to sing them in the car that much.
No. Yeah. What's your favorite disco song?
Disco, that's a good one. Disco song. Oh, gosh. I don't know. Maybe Burn, Baby, Burn, Disco Inferno.
That's not a bad one. One. Burn, baby, burn. Yeah, that's a good one. So in the music realm, we've just seen this in the news. Should Motley Crue tour again?
I really haven't given it any thought.
They said they're not going to another. These bands that are always out there on these farewell tours, it's all crap, isn't it? Can you ever trust anybody?
I think it depends on how well they've taken care of themselves and preserved their talent voices and stuff. So again, I've seen McCartney, Billy Joel, or others who I think still can sing their songs well. I think groups that haven't played together for years and haven't been talking to each other is probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
I just don't think the chemistry and stuff, unless you have second generations. I understand some of these groups now, like I saw some reiteration of Leonard Skinner. It's like relatives of people from the original band. Maybe. Yeah. It sort of depends. I do think, though, if you're going to do a farewell tour, you really should just do one, though.
I'm talking to you, Kiss.
When they keep doing it, you kind of don't take it seriously anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to go. I'm not as much heavy metal. I tend to go for, as you put, Beatles. I tend to go for the vocals, the vocalist, the melody,
yeah.
the whole instrumentation, kind of orchestra, and groups that spun off, or groups that have that influence, like Electric Light Orchestra, and things like that. I tend to like ones who are kind of into that, into the production and the melody and that. But again, there's certainly a huge oldie circuit, and also tribute bands. You didn't mention that. I don't know how you feel about that, where it's just, and they have funny names, like they'll be like whatever, blimp, a tribute to Led Zeppelin or something. I made that up, but I'm saying it's just so funny that you can make a living apparently, or at least nice gig on weekends to play the songs of classic bands.
Yeah, I mean,
frankly, I would do that if I had any musical talent. I would do that on weekends, honestly, be in a tribute band.
I play in a band on the side as well. It's one of my other hobbies. You know, it's a band called Retro Art. I play guitar and I sing a little bit. But honestly, we're just a straight up cover band. But I always said, you know, we need a hook, we need a thing. And you mentioned the tribute thing, which has kind of been done, and people do it well, and some people don't. One of the things I always said we should do, we're a dad band. You know, we play a long range of classic to current rock, but I always said, you know, the classic Office, the Office, you know, with Steve Carell, the classic Office line. Every time that somebody said something a little inappropriate, you know, Steve Carell or Michael Scott would go, "That's what she said." You remember that? I always said we should call our band "That's What She Said," and we only, as guys, sing songs that were originally sung by girls. That's my idea. So that's out there now. Nobody's gonna steal it. Yeah.
You're like living the side life. I wish I had, but yeah, you go. There's a lot of things you could do with that. You could do all the Carpenter songs. If you want to go for the soft rock, get the hard songs. Linda Ronstadt.
I know Linda Ronstadt be at the top of the list. Yeah. Yeah, be good.
You could do all the Sheryl Crow songs. No, there you go. You got it's a large repertoire there. You could do.
I know. We just got to actually be able to sing it that way. So, next question.
One question on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Though, for you on that. If you're singing it as a guy and you have lines that say like she or me or I'm a whatever, do you change the gender or do you stay on the original? You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's a good question. We do a couple of songs like that now. And, you know, the classic song by Pat Benatar is Hit Me With Your Best Shot, right?
Yeah.
And there's a line in there that says, before I put another notch in my lipstick case, we changed that into my guitar case.
Yeah, you got it. You have to. Yeah. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense. No.
Okay, gotcha.
Not at all. Next question. You got a cell phone. What's the most crazy? Maybe it's embarrassing. The one app that's a guilty pleasure that you spent way too much time on. That you're probably thinking, yeah, you know, people'd laugh if they knew I was on this much.
You are. I mean, I'm on the MLB app for baseball. That's probably not anything to be too embarrassed about. So,
no funny games you play. You on Candy Crush or something?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say I'll tell you. The thing I do is I will get sucked in by those slideshows. Yeah, which will be like celebrities. You won't believe what they look like now. Or restaurants. Classic restaurants that have closed, or 25 actors who can't get work in Hollywood anymore because they're assholes. I'll get sucked into those.
And then you start scrolling and scrolling
and scrolling. Through, and the next thing you know, you click through 50 slides, and you're like I just waste half hour of my life there.
And the picture that you saw initially to click on it, you never even saw. You never ever got to that one. That's the one. That's the thing that pisses me off. That needs to be
investigated by the FTC or something. Because you're absolutely right. They'll show you some usually attractive woman with and you're like, well, where's this picture coming up? And it doesn't. I think that's just a consumer fraud.
It is the same department that investigates that should also investigate the telemarketers. My favorite one, I get it all the time, and the guy will go, "Hey, is Kathy there?"
Yeah.
And then no matter what you say, they'll go, "Oh, well, maybe you can help me." And I'm like, come on, man. Yeah. And they're always trying to get me to, you know, would you like to donate $25 or $50 or $100? And I'll say, I'll give you $750,000. And they'll go, that's great.
That's great.
It's just all crap stuff. Okay, next question.
You could want. I know you could do a whole podcast on hilarious some of the scams out there.
I should. That's a great idea. You know what I should do is I should get somebody on the phone. I should get somebody on here that's one of those telemarketers and go, what was that like? That's what we should do. That's a good idea, Scott.
No, there are some great ones out there. They've gone far beyond the guy in Nigeria who's a prince and has money in the bank. They get more elaborate.
Wait a minute, that's fake? What's the best Christmas gift you ever got when you were a kid?
That's a tough one. Well, the one that comes to mind now, maybe because it's football season, is at one point I got one of those. I think it was like a Joe Namath's electric vibrating, those football games where all the players are on magnets and they vibrate. And
oh, you're saying you got to be of a certain age to even know what that is. Yeah, it's like electric football. Yeah.
Very low tech.
Yeah, absolutely. I had one of those from like I don't remember what two teams it was. I think it was the Broncos and whoever the Broncos may have played, maybe the Cowboys. You got two, because it was like a Super Bowl thing. And yeah, for those of you that never seen this, you've got to go look it up on YouTube or something. It was basically, you'd get all these little squares with football players on top. You'd line them all up, and then you'd flip the switch, and the entire metal football field would go, and they'd just move all over. And then, the worst thing was if you tried to pass, right? You could never complete a pass because you'd have that little rubber football. You have to fling it. You remember that?
Not only do I remember that, John.
Oh my God!
One of my childhood sad stories was when I flipped the pass on the little metal thing, the little magnet came off the ball. I missed the receiver. It went under the stove, and I lost the football.
There you go. Because Dad's not pulling that stove out. It's level, damn it.
No, it's like that football's gone. You'll have to find another one.
Yeah, because if Dad pulls that stove out, it's not going to be level. And every time Mom cracks an egg, it rolls to the side of the pan. That crap ain't happening. Yeah. All right. One last question. I think you're going to like this one. This is this is the one I always end on. So, Scott, you're in a TV show. Well, pick the TV show, I guess is what I'm saying, that Scott Litch would be the character in. You're not going to say, oh, I'd be a good Kramer in Seinfeld, but Scott's a character in a TV show. What TV show would you want to be a character in?
I love that question, and I'm stalling because I'm thinking there's a lot of shows I watched as a kid growing up, more recent ones, and I'd be myself in the show, just I would be like the character. I wouldn't be playing, like you said, Kramer.
No, you're you. Scott's the character.
Yeah. Okay, I'll without belaboring it, I think probably I'd either be myself on like one of those 70s crime shows like Hawaii Five-0 or something. And then lately, I know this is not new, but I'm getting to binge watching Mad Men, so maybe I'd be on that.
And what would you be? What would you be on there? Say you were on Hawaii Five-0. Would you be one of the cops or one of the crooks?
Oh, I think I'd be one of the cops.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There you go. Not a bad answer. Hawaii Five-0. First time that answer's ever come up.
Well, good weather and all that, and also I honestly I kind of like. We seem like old fogies, but where it was a little bit more formal, not super, but just like guys tended to wear like suits and get dressed up. Yeah. It's less casual time. The cops dressed up in a coat and tie. And even though they're in Hawaii and it's tropical, it's probably stinking hot.
Well, if you're going to be on a cop show, it's way better there than on Barney Miller, right?
Yeah. But so I think so. I probably missed some shows, but I kind of I grew up watching all those cop dramas in the 70s, 60s, and 70s and such.
Scott, one of the things I did is I asked some of my friends to tweet in or text in as I was putting this show together. So before I let you go, I got a friend here that's asking for some marital help. And I think he's got a good question. Okay. So I'm going to shoot it for you here. His name's Travis Huber, and Travis, got a scenario for you. Okay. It's day 2 of a 5-day business trip. And he does what he does. He calls home. He's got young kids and it's just not going too well. Tips for Travis in a situation like that. And I should also add, he's asking for a friend.
Well, I just off the top of my head, I mean, maybe this is a conversation. Maybe a FaceTime where you can actually see the person's facial expression. It can help to see if you're reading the tone of voice correctly. That's just might be the time to go online and send your wife some things she might like, candy, flowers,
go.
Yeah,
something
just kind of surprise her.
Yeah,
and then of course when you get back, I think it's a good tip. Bring a some kind of souvenir, not just like a shot glass with the name of the town from where you're where you're visiting back as a gift. Something you might like. I think think about something like that.
Not just, something that you found in the airport right next to the gate.
No, yeah, right.
Exactly.
You got it looked like you put a little bit of thought into it, not just picked up the right.
Yeah. I got you this sweatshirt. Yeah, it's in my size, but I thought you might like it. Yeah.
It's in my size. Right.
Scott, let's cover this. Where can they find you online? Where can they find the book? Where's all the places they can hear from you and read?
You can get it on Amazon in paperback or Kindle. You can also get it from Outskirts Press, their bookstore. And you can also see links to this on my Facebook page, which is Husband Survival Guide. You type that in, it should show up.
Great. And we'll get all the links to that in the show notes. But, Scott, any closing thoughts for the listeners of What's That Like Nation?
I think, thank you for your time and great questions. I would just say, keep at it, but also I'd love to hear feedback. Seriously, in terms of if any of this makes sense or you think I'm off base, I can take I could take some constructive feedback. But I would like to see what both strictly husbands think about it.
Yeah. So
if your wife finally agrees, because this sort of thing is kind of sort of testimonials that if people think I'm on the right track, that may give me an idea for future writing and commentary and so forth. And as I said, I'm kind of just disseminating, getting it out there now. So I'm really interested to see what people think.
Yeah. All right. Well, you can, as you said, on Facebook, A Husband Survival Guide, those messages go directly to you. Any feedback for Scott, get it to him there. Let's put it this way, dude. I think you got great advice. I don't think anything here's out of line, but to protect myself, all the opinions of the guests of the What That Like podcast are their own, just to have some fun with it.
And also, let me be clear: there's no money back guarantee if you follow the advice and you still can't figure it out or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I would tell you this, having read it, I think there's some good humorous stuff in there. Well, it's great, good advice. Let's put it that way. It's good advice for any married couple, really to go through it. And if wives out there are listening, you know what? You want to give your husband a little nice stocking stuffer, throw this sucker in the stocking and have some fun with it. It's as you said, it's not a terribly demanding read. It is something that someone can get through in a little bit of time, and it's humorous enough to hold all your attention spans. I think that's the best, an online testimony I'll give you right here, Scott. How about that?
That sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, and glad you could come on. Thanks a lot, Scott.
Thank you. Take care, John.
Right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks to Scott for coming on the show. Once again, the book is A Husband's Survival Guide to Marriage. You can find that on Amazon, Outskirts Press. You can find the links in the show notes. Don't forget to follow him on Facebook as well under A Husband's Survival Guide. Like I said, buy this, get it for your husbands as a stocking stuffer. Your sons, your husbands, whatever it might be, and put it in there, and it'll be a little humorous look. It'll be kind of a neat little book. So don't forget to rate and review the show for us on iTunes. Follow us on Twitter at What's That Like Podcast. You follow us on Facebook, What's That Like Podcast. And without further ado, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Have a great Thanksgiving, everyone. Peace out. What's That Like is available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Search for What's That Like. Subscribe today and never miss an episode. Streaming is available at SoundCloud.com and on the SoundCloud app. Follow What's That Like at Facebook.com/What's That Like Podcast and on Twitter at What's That Like Pod. All opinions of the guests of the What's That Like podcast are their own, not necessarily the views of the host or the podcast producers. We hope you enjoy this podcast serving Central Illinois and beyond. Peace out!